here's how it works. Step one, step two, step three. So this is the guts of the interview. So this might be a solid 15-minute, 20-minute part of the interview where you're teaching the thing that you're there to teach, right? This is your key framework. The power in this story, though, is tying it to someone they already believe in and someone that they've already seen have success. And so I could say, hey, anyone listening to this is probably familiar with Alex Hormozi. He's kind of a controversial figure nowadays, right? He says some pretty intense things and he's kind of everywhere. And he's coming up on his third best-selling book. He's very successful. If you know Alex now and you're familiar with his brand now, you may think, well, he's always had a massive YouTube following. He's always had, this access to these amazing thought leaders, and he's always been speaking from stages. That's actually not true. What I would invite people to do, if you haven't already delved into Alex's story, is look at where he built his brand. He built his brand in podcasting and specifically with podcast guesting. In fact, his very popular podcast, if you go back the first year of his podcast, is clips of him being a guest on other people's shows. And that is how Alex Hormozi got started. He used the same process that I'm telling you and teaching you on this podcast. If anyone's listening and they want to go deeper with this idea that you share with podcast guesting, what's the next best step? That cues you up for the call to action, which is where you're going to close the interview. Hey, thanks so much for letting me share those stories. I know I've really enjoyed my time here. If anyone's listening and they're curious about podcast guesting, or they're inspired by Michelle's story, or they want to be a little more like Alex Hormozi in their life, please go to sevenfigureleap.com/start. That's going to give them access to our profitable podcasting playbook. It's literally going to give them a 5-step email series that's going to go through the 5 Ps that I went through in today's interview. You can be a lot more like Alex Hormozi by simply going through and enacting and implementing the stuff you're going to learn in that course. This is the same 5P framework that Michelle used to get the results that I just shared with her. So go to sevenfigureleap.com/start and you can get these results for yourself. Thanks so much for having me here today. So that is really it in a nutshell. Now, obviously, a given interview will have more or less time. There's nuances. But what I found now in working with clients recently in our Podcast Profits Accelerator program is this was always kind of the squishy part of the program, right? Like we're really good at helping people get clear on the 5 Ps, purpose, which is like why they want to be on shows, who they're trying to reach, naming their transformation, getting really clear on their story brand framework and their introduction. Like that's step one, very tangible, discrete plan. Step two is finding the right shows. So like which podcast should I be featured on? We've got amazing templates and tools and AI tools. That's pretty dialed in. Once you know which shows you want to be on, step three in our framework is pitch. Again, we've got really dialed in approaches to how to present yourself to hosts to make them want to have you on their show. And in fact, that pitch really sets up step 4, which is perform. And that's really what today was about, is perform. How do I show up and be an effective interviewee when I get this opportunity? So I am now using a normal person who you probably have never heard of as an example that this works for normal people too. So that anyone in the audience is like, oh, this also works for normal people like Michelle, right? So you have me as the expert telling my origin story, and you have me saying, the thing I teach works. Like, look at these examples or this one particular example out there from some celebrity or some well-known person that it works for. And this is kind of bringing it home and giving people a very specific, concrete example of how this works for normal people who didn't create the framework, who aren't a celebrity with a big following, who are just normal people who took it and applied it to their own life. This works really well at the end of the interview because it naturally transitions to that call to action. Right? Because the call to action is telling people, be like Michelle, go take the first step on this journey for yourself.